Well, good afternoon. We are live. And welcome to the National Newspaper Publishers Association's Let It Be Known. We are uh, planning to discuss the reaction to the State of the Union. Judith Brown Dianis, the executive director of the Advancement Project, which is a national racial justice organization, issued this statement. She says last night, State of the Union held just weeks after the killing of Tyree Nichols did little to address the core problems inherent in policing. While President Biden acknowledged the pain and grief of families like the parents of Tyree Nichols, his administration's efforts to put more money and resources into policing will only result in more murders of Black people by the hands of police. This will not bring justice to Tyree Nichols, nor the millions of families that fear for their loved ones every time they interact with the police. There is no justice in the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, which President Biden supports. There cannot be accountability, transparency, or public trust in our policing system when policing itself is founded on white supremacy. And those are the words of the fabulous woman you see on your screen now, Judith Brown Dianis of the Advancement Project. Judith, good afternoon. It is again good to see you.
Good to see you too. Sorry about my light. I've got sun everywhere.
It's like you're transcending.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Well, we saw, an otherwise solid State of the Union address. Overall, the president stood up and made some serious comments, although he was being catcalled by unprofessional, childish like certain
ignorant.
members.
Ignorant, quite frankly.
Ignorant. There's the word, ignorant.
Mhm.
And join us also, Judith, by the way, is the one and only Michael Harriot from the Griot. It's good to see Michael join the Black Press today to talk about this issue. Michael, we are speaking with Judith about her response to the State of the Union. The Advancement Project did put out a release. Judith, sum it up for us.
Well, where do we start? I mean, first of all, the speech overall was a good speech. He needed this moment to tout all the things that he has done and where we are in terms of jobs. But the thing that, we were most concerned about at Advancement Project is policing. I was on with you yesterday. Yep. And I predicted they wasn't going to say anything new. And if I had bet on that, I would be a billionaire right now. Yes. Because there was nothing new. And not only was there nothing new, but the part of the disappointment that I also have is that the parents and loved ones of people killed by the police were there. Not only did he have Tyree Nichols' parents with him, but CBC members had people, survivors and family members. And so I can't imagine having lost a loved one at the hands of the police and then sitting here and listening to the president say, quote, do something. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's traumatizing, right? So he did talk about his executive order. That's great. He should talk about that because that's his accomplishment. He again called on them. This is exactly what I said he was going to do. He called on them to pass the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. And he said, do something. Yeah. And that is pretty underwhelming.
Michael, what did you see and what didn't you see that perhaps could have made a difference last night especially as far as what Judith is saying, but in any other area that you'd like to go into?
Well, I think when it comes to policing, he left a lot to be desired, although, I do have to give him credit for not pushing and kind of dropping that Safer America plan that he had been pushing in previous months, up, and especially leading up to the midterm elections. He kind of made no mention of it, which I'm glad that he didn't. And, hopefully the CBC has gotten him to drop that absurd idea of putting 100,000 more police officers on the streets. The backstory to that is they were going to push it through a combination of kind of arcane tactics, and the CBC got him to drop it. They refused to sign on to it. But it was interesting to see him go into the specifics of everything, and then when it came to policing, say do something,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Right.
Right.
he
Right.
even
That's
talked
right.
about small, detailed ideas, such as like hotels be putting stuff on your bill when you go to stay in a hotel, and they be adding money
And
to
the
your
airlines.
stay. Yeah. But then when it came to, policing, he was like, yeah, just do something. Like, yeah, whatever y'all do, it's fine.
Mhm.
And but overall, I think that as a political speech, Biden is who he is. He's not a revolutionary. I don't, know that you can't become a president and be a revolutionary. But overall, I think he tweaked some of the Republicans, made some of them mad, had them, like a preacher who's stepping on toes. So I give him a B plus.
Mm. B plus. Judith, B plus, is that generous, or is that about right?
I mean, I think Michael's right. And also I follow you on Twitter, by the way, Michael, because you're hilarious and I love what you do on Twitter. But anyway, so I'm fangirling for a moment. Yeah, I think B plus is fine, but the problem is, for me, the policing part just overshadows everything.
Mhm.
And so if I had to go on that, I bring it down to a C. But I just also want to mention, because Michael talked about the president dropping his plan. Unfortunately, yesterday, the White House sent out to people his plan again. And that plan still has 100,000 new officers. He didn't mention those details because
Mm.
politically he shouldn't mention those details, that he's still behind the idea of 100,000 new cops on the streets.
Mhm.
And so yeah, the devil is in the details, right? He did not talk about the details for a reason, right?
Yeah.
And so yeah, still just worried about the direction that we're moving in. And I do think, like, on the other things he was strong. I will say, like, on immigration, it wasn't very strong either, right? That's another one of those areas where it was kind of like, oh, and another thing, and another thing, as opposed to like being like really like, let's dig in on this thing. And I think Michael's right. Like, the dig in on airlines and hotels was just, I mean, that was kind of random, and like where did that come from?
Right.
I guess that's talking to the people, right, who are travelers or whatever. But I really didn't need to hear details on that.
Well, Michael, if not at the State of the Union, then where and when does he talk about this? And of course, talk is talk. It's cheap, as we say, right? When does he do something about it, or what can he do? Something, has he done all he can, aside from not really digging in at the State of the Union?
Well, part of what we talk about when we talk about policing is that, like, whatever a president or even Congress can do, you know, the state level is far more important.
Mhm.
And so, we don't I think just by having the Safer America plan is harmful, because if you get into the weeds, the 100,000 police officers is the exact same goal as the 93-94 crime bill. It was like, that's what the 93-94 crime bill did: put 100,000 new police officers on the streets using the same mechanism, right? Like cop grants, the cops program, which was created by that crime bill. And that's not the way to police in America. Now, I didn't expect Biden to get up there and say abolish the police. But right,
Imagine that.
but we do have to imagine a new form of policing in America. And, I think that, with all of his political astuteness, he could introduce that idea of America to say, if we started today, and said, we're going to try to create something that fights crime and keeps the streets safe and keeps the traffic safe and, stops people from committing and enforces the law, there's no way we'd say, like, let's just give a bunch of white men who are 18-year-old guns, train them for 6 weeks and put them on the street, right? Like, that is an insane idea, right? So, you don't have to say abolish the police. You don't have to say, well, there are some good cops. Or you can say, hey, I want to introduce some new ideas that will make America safer. And it's not to put 100,000 poorly trained high school graduates on the street with guns. And it's not to say, let's keep doing it the way we've been doing it since we decided to create a force to catch slaves, right? I think he can do those two things and make people feel safe, right? Like, you can introduce the idea of, here's how to make you feel safer, right? And so that leaves a lot to be desired. I think that one of the problems with Biden and the Biden administration is they really rely on traditionalism. They don't want to upset the apple cart. And I think that is one of the policy problems that we have when we pick an old white man, but we know an old white man is who America is going to eventually pick anyway.
Can I jump in? Because I think, Michael, to your point, like, first, what I would want him to talk about is, we need not a new form of policing, but we need a new form of public safety, right? Like, we got to focus on, like, let's not talk about them. Let's talk about what, like you were saying, what makes you safe, right? And so I think that's important. I also think, like, and I know he wouldn't do this because, again, he's pro-police, always has been, always will be. And it might have started in Scranton, I don't know. But there's also a way in which he could take the police to task, right? And that has not happened, right? To say, look, law enforcement, enough.
Right.
This is not the way that this is not working. Black people are being killed. But it's like the soft pedaling of it, right, allows them to kind of escape any liability as a system, right? And it allows them to just look at, we're going to keep training them, because he talked about that training, that's for sure. I don't know what kind of training would have saved Tyree Nichols' life. In fact, no training would have saved his life. No training would have saved George Floyd's life. No training would have saved Breonna Taylor's life. And so this is, we can keep talking about that, but then it allows policing as a system to be off the hook for killing Black people. And we need someone who's going to be at the bully pulpit saying, law enforcement, you have a problem.
Yeah.
And you need to own it, and we need to do something about it, because there is no other industry, right, where we would allow people to keep doing something that was wrong and harming people and then say, let's give them more money. Let's invest in them more, and we're just going to train our way out of this. We wouldn't do it. And if they were doing something that was harmful, we would want all the money back. But that hasn't happened because we have a real, an affection for law enforcement in this country.
But Michael, when there's a George Floyd or Sandra Bland or Breonna Taylor, Tyree Nichols, folks like President Biden, folks like any elected official you name, they rush to this to put their names there to say how devastating it is, and how they extend their condolences, and we must do better. They do it in those settings, right? But when it comes to getting something done significantly, and like you said earlier, and you make a fantastic point, and a very important point, is that it has to be done on the state level. But even we see it on the state level, you have governors and legislatures, state legislators saying the same thing. Oh, this is horrible that it happened, and yet nothing comes of it. They won't stand. Biden wouldn't stand in front of joint session of Congress last night and say what Judith would love to have heard him say, and many millions of people like Judith would have loved to have heard him say that. So what do we take away from that?
Well, what we take away from it is, when we say, millions of people, and when we talk about policing, there's two things we have to understand, right? So for white people, policing works. I mean, there's really no other way to say it, right? Like, police protect white people. Police enforce laws that protect white people. They do all of the things that white people want. And the reason we valorize them is because it worked for white people, right? And so the job of the president, like, I don't know if Biden can get people to care about white people to care about black people, right? Because that's the problem. Is like white people don't care. Like, they might feel concerned and they may feel sad when they see a video of Tyree Nichols, but caring is doing something about it, right? Like, you can say you feel a thing, but when you care about a thing, you change it, right? And there's nothing in the history of America that white people have, a majority of white people have cared about, that we haven't taken action on. When they wanted to, when they want lower taxes, we conjure up all of these ways to decrease taxes by eliminating a tax loophole for inheritance tax. And when it comes to gun, like, the reason we have so many school shootings is because white people care about guns, right? So, but what Biden could do, like, here are some specific concrete things he could do. The federal government gives money to police officers, right? Biden could say, hey, you can't get this money unless you adhere to these specific things that certifies your department to receive the money from the people. But today, like literally 15 minutes from now, he could say, hey, I have created a task force inside the Department of Justice that will investigate every police shooting, right? Like, he could do that right now, right? Like, you could do that. You could hold police accountable and it not have to go through a political act. The thing is, you have to have the will to do it. And to get elected, you got to get a bunch of white people to vote for you. And by reforming or changing policing in America, you're changing something that works for white people. And that's the conundrum here.
Judith,
yeah,
I'll let you pick up on that too. Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying, yeah, that's it. I mean, I think that's right. It is, like I think I said yesterday, like, white people get, protect and serve, and we get law and order. And so if you get protect and serve, and who are you protecting me from, right? Like, I like the idea that you're protecting me from those black people, right? So this works for me. So why would I want to change something that works for me?
Yeah.
Just because, a few black people get killed. Yeah, well, that's the way we would want it, but no, that is not it. And our fetish with law enforcement, the power of the police unions, the money that comes with that for politicians and the police foundations, is too much for them to say that we are going to really look at radical change. And I think, to Michael's point, like, the president, again, like, most of the work around policing and real change and transformation around public safety is going to happen at the local level. And that's going to happen through organizing in communities. And at the federal level, what we are going to see is that there will be money, and that they do often in other areas, and in this area, they do incentives. You can incentivize police departments to do certain things, and you can use a carrot and a stick, right? And so the carrot could be that, like, we're going to, give grants to police departments or to cities, for example, to a city that has decided to take police out of traffic stops. We're going to do that through something else, right? Or we're going to use the cops' money. We're going to repurpose the cops' money, right? And use it because it's community-oriented policing. We're going to community-oriented part. We're going to repurpose this. And if your city is going to take police out of police stops, we're going to give you money. And, that will incentivize perhaps some cities to act differently.
Well, again, and yesterday and again this morning, Michael, we talked about reimagining. Someone wrote in during the program that It could even start with a simple thing as renaming it. Don't call it the police department. Call it the public safety department. It's a lot in a name, is what they were saying. But ideally, Michael, I may have asked Judith this question yesterday. I'm not sure, but ideally, what would a reimagined police department, if you will, look like in America?
Well, so I am one of the people who do not believe you can reimagine people. You cannot take a thing and repurpose it. If you use a hammer as a pair of pliers, it's still a hammer, right? Police were
Right.
created to patrol and police Black people from the beginning. So whatever we
Right.
do is going to have that element in it. What we can do is do what a logical person would do. We could say, look, we're going to stop policing police officers from traffic stops, as we said earlier, right? And instead of that, we're going to put that into another department, because it can't be in the police department, right? Because police departments are going to default to what
Mhm.
they've always done, right? And police officers think it works, right? Police departments think it works. When you talk to a police chief, they don't cite like the crime rate or the number of property crimes for a year. They cite arrests. This is how many people we arrested, right? Which a lot of the crime rate is created by police. So first of all, you got to take police, disassemble the things that police do. There got to be some people who don't have guns, who just are educated in traffic and traffic flow to do traffic stops. And when we say traffic stops, right, to monitor traffic, because we know like putting police on the side of the road and catching people who going over the speed limit does not disincentivize people from going fast, right? Putting people in jail for drug possession does not disincentivize people from using drugs. So if we imagined how we're going to handle the drug problem, police wouldn't even be involved, because we know policing doesn't affect drug use, right? If we wanted to affect crime, we know policing won't even be involved, right? Because policing don't really have that much impact. Police solve about 2% of all major crimes in America. People are always shocked to learn that, right? So it ain't like, even if they solve 3%, it's not going to have a real impact on crime. But what would really stop people from committing crime is improve the economic circumstances, the education in a
Mhm.
specific area. All of that really and truly is policing, or
Yeah.
is public safety, right? Like
Right.
if you imagine public safety, what makes the public safer? Giving them better education, stop unequal schools,
Yep.
right? Affect the job market. All of that affects public safety. But again, the back to your point, when we put all of this and say, imagine this under the umbrella of policing, it ain't gonna work, right?
Well,
It ain't gonna work with police. We can't reform the police, because they're gonna do what they are trained to do. What you gonna do? Fire all the police chiefs in America and all the lieutenants and all the sergeants who really think these ideas work because they've been doing it for 20, 30, 40 years sometimes, right? That's not going to work. So reimagining policing, you really can't, because like it's always going to be a hammer, even if you use it as a pair of pliers.
well, Michael said, Judith, something I agree 100% about the economic piece there and giving people this the economic and the education, because how does that change things? Because people who have something to lose are less likely to commit crime. Those with nothing to lose, then you got a problem. And so I really like, Michael, how you broke that down. Judith, going back to President Biden, as Greer points out, he says, at what point do we just stop looking for change from an 80-year-old white man, from 80-year-old white men? What are our options? Are there any cities functioning in a way that does not cause Black people so much harm?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, like we shouldn't be looking to him for all the solutions. That's for sure. That's a failing strategy. I think that there is great work being done by organizers across the country, right? Like if we think about traffic stops, for example, because they are the gateway drug to racial profiling, to killing, to police brutality. There are cities that have stopped, have taken police out of it, right? And so it is this like, let's move it to like the Department of Transportation instead, right? So you have places like Philly, Berkeley, California, Seattle, and some others who have already made that move, right? And time will tell, right? Is it working? And then what are the police doing with their time instead, right? Because actually, if we're taking them out, then we could actually start cutting police forces, because most of the work that they do, at least in our communities, are police stops, right?
Mhm.
And those police stops are racial profiling, they're pretextual, and again, they lead to all kinds of other consequences for people. So I think we cannot look to President Biden for the answers, right? Like there's a saying in movement that we keep us safe.
Mhm.
And so we've got to be thinking about what we can do to both reimagine public safety, which also means what are the violence intervention programs that we have? Who are the interrupters in our community? Are they getting support for the kind of work that they will do? Of course, like education is quite important, because also the other thing is with crime, sometimes crime is related to crimes of survival, right?
Mhm.
Like people just trying to survive. Like a lot of people
That's
are
my point.
still,
No, when they got something to lose or nothing
right.
to lose.
People are still like arrested for shoplifting with serious consequences.
Mhm.
Shoplifting baby formula because your baby needed baby formula. And so I think we need to be thinking about what are the supports that our people need that do not involve the police.
And that what you just laid out too, I think it goes back to something Michael said earlier. It can help something Michael said earlier. He made a very profound statement that 2% of major cases get solved. Perhaps if they do it the way you and Michael, Judith have laid it out here today, maybe they'll have more opportunities to up that number from 2%.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, I think
Michael,
so.
what?
I think so. And then what also happens is, I mean, let's be real about it, right? Like, we're still gonna need some people with guns to show up at bank robberies and when there's a shootout on the street, right? But what happens is, if you take the traffic stops out of it and you put in people who respond to mental health emergencies, and then you take the economics out of it, and you put the education part into it, what happens is, when you have to hire people with guns, you have to hire fewer people. And so you can choose from a very educated group of people who know and have been trained on specific ways to solve crimes, to show up to a violent incident. And first of all, you could choose then from people who are college educated, who have a degree in law enforcement or a degree in whatever we rename or reimagine policing as. Because like training people for a total of 833 hours, about 6 to 8 weeks on average, is insane when you give them guns and put them out in the street and say, enforce the law, right? Because they don't know the law in many cases, right? Police spend more hours learning how to shoot than they learning about the Constitution and the law, right? So it's crazy to keep doing this thing and not expecting them to shoot black people in the face when they are trained to shoot black people in the face, right?
Right.
And so what you can get a more educated, more sensitive, and when I say sensitive, I don't mean like, sympathetic. I mean a person who knows the nuances of solving the problem to which their job is dedicated. I
Mhm.
think you can do that once you get all of the other stuff that police don't need to do, the responding to mental health emergencies, the people who respond to noise complaints, the people who are pulling you over because you were driving 7 miles over the speed limit. None of that needs to be done by people with guns.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Judith Browne, Dianis of the Advancement Project. We certainly appreciate the work
Thank
that you
you.
continue to do. We admonish people to follow the Advancement Project and the work that they're doing. Please do. It's
Thank you.
so critical, especially in our community, particularly in our community. And of course, Michael Harriot, Judith mentioned earlier, his social media account is hilarious. I mean, he's got all types of great stuff. Of course, at the Griot.
And it's profound and not just hilarious, but profound.
Profound, exactly. It's profound, and that's much more important, right? Exactly. So thanks so much to both of you for the work you do and for joining the Black Press today. We appreciate it. Everybody have a
Thank you.
great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.